Yeah, the great thing about Darryn is he can hurt you in so many different ways, right? And so the thing he's the best at, it's his nickname, which is Bucket Jones, is Darryn can score from all over the floor. Darryn is he's a really gifted and natural scorer of the basketball. It's very hard to keep him out of the paint. He's got big shoulders. He's very skilled. He's got a very good mid-range game and is now, a very good three-point shooter.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible. Paid all who enter. Beware of this podcast. That's right, this is the paid podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer. I'm here with Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible. Talking some more KU basketball. Also, we have a very special guest coming up later on in the show. He is a Ryan Bernardi, who is the high school head coach for Darryn Peterson, who is the gem of KU basketball's early signing period recruiting class. We're going to talk about him a little more coming up later on the show, and then we'll spend a lot of time talking about Peterson with Bernardi, as Darryn Peterson is the highest-rated recruit to sign with Kansas since Josh Jackson, and if you want to go even further back, since Andrew Wiggins. He is a perennial top 5 player, number 1 guard, number 1 or number 2 guard in the class of 2025. So a big get for Kansas. We're going to be talking about all of that with Ryan Bernardi, his head coach, coming up later on in the show. But first, let's knock out here some discussion about the Champions Classic, which Kansas played in on Tuesday night. Kansas takes down Michigan State 77-69. Kansas is now 3-0. Michigan State is now bad. And that was my main takeaway also. So before we dive too much more into it, though, I do want to say, if you like what you're listening to, or if you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to subscribe, be sure to like, be sure to drop us a comment, share your thoughts as well. Speaking of sharing thoughts, Kevin, Kansas wins 77-69 over Michigan State in one of the most Champions Classic games of all Champions Classic games with how it unfolded. What were your takeaways?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of reasons that people struggle to hit shots, generally speaking, at Champions Classic. But one of them that people don't talk about, Nick, is they use kind of a Spalding ball that's different than teams are used to using. And so you do see, players kind of struggle a little bit to shoot. You and I talked about it, I feel like, a little bit last night, just offhand. When a single player hits shots at Champions Classic, it's almost like that's a great key for your team to win, whether that's Quentin Grimes making outside shots, whether that's Grayson Allen having the game that he had one year, Tyrese Maxey, another guy that had sort of a huge Champions Classic performance that helped lead to a strong showing. But yeah, I think people are going to look at the North Carolina game and the Michigan State game, and the first thing that they're going to kind of circle is that lack of shooting from the wings. And I do think, like I said, there are some reasons for it. I'm not worried at this point. I think it's still so early in the season. So many things are still getting ironed out. One thing I will say, though, Nick, and I'm pretty sure you have a stat or a fact or two on this thing, it was a pretty good night for Hunter Dickinson.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned having one guy shoot the ball well. Hunter Dickinson made 13 field goals, Kevin, in the game for KU. KU made 28 field goals in total. So Hunter Dickinson accounted for essentially half of KU's made baskets. And for the first about 8 minutes of the game, he accounted for all of their baskets. I don't think anybody made a shot for Kansas besides Hunter Dickinson for the first good 5-6 minutes of the game for KU. Dickinson finishes with 28 points, along with 12 rebounds. He's the first player in Champions Classic history to have 2 25-10 games. You remember last year against Kentucky, he had 25-20, I believe, was his stat line against Kentucky in the Champions Classic last year. He comes back in this year's edition of it and literally carries Kansas with those 28 points. And I think he had KU's first 8 points and then really kept it going beyond there. And beyond that, it really wasn't much of a night to write home about for anybody else for Kansas. KJ Adams goes 1 of 7. DeJuan Harris goes 2 of 7. Rylan Griffin ends up going 4 of 10 from the floor to hit 2 threes. Zeke Mayo goes 2 of 8. So really not much to write home about for basically everybody else on the team for Kansas. And yeah, the first half especially was ugly, ugly basketball. If you were watching in the first half, kudos to you because it was rough. Both teams were shooting under 25% from the floor at one point. Kansas missed a ton of shots right at the rim in the first half. Zach Clements missed like 2 easy bunnies in the first half in the 2 minutes that he played, and then he did not return to the game. One thing that I did want to ask you about, Kevin, is is there any, I guess, I don't know, surprise maybe isn't the right term, but did your eyebrow furrow at all to notice that Rakis Passmore, who had been playing quite a bit when you go back to exhibitions and even in the first couple games of the season, only ends up getting 2 minutes in this game and seemed to be not at all on the rotation for Kansas in this particular matchup?
That didn't really surprise me with him being a freshman. I do think that you would put him in if, maybe you needed an energy spark or something like that at this point in the season. That's not to say that he can't carve out a bigger role as the season goes on. I think Rakis Passmore has the talent to do just that. But I think that with where he's at right now, you probably lean on experience. And it was never a sort of situation. I'm not saying that Kansas was, destined to win or that they were blowing them out or anything. But I'll also say, Nick, that there wasn't really a moment where Kansas seemed like it was in extreme danger, right? Like there wasn't a part where you were down 8 and you're looking at that bench and you're thinking, my gosh, like we have to get something here that's different than what we have on the court. I think that a lot of it last night with Kansas was you're getting the looks that you want. You're getting the guys taking the looks that you want. Stay the course, and this is probably going to go the way that you want it to go. At one point, I remember tweeting out, Kansas is 1 for 6 on layups, has 2 transition points, is 1 for 9 from 3, and Nick, they led by 5 at that point. Like it was a very ugly game to your point, but I think that for Rakis Passmore to be in a spot where he was going to play a lot of minutes last night, I really think that Bill Self needed to feel like his experienced guys weren't giving him enough, that they were in trouble where he felt like, hey, we've got to get a spark. We got to try something different. And so I don't think that they were ever really in that spot. Like I said, it wasn't like they were blowing them out, but at the same time, there was never a point where Kansas was on the ropes, bloodied, and you're thinking, man, I don't think they're going to get across the finish line.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan State was incredibly unimpressive for basically the entire game. They didn't really do anything. They were honestly worse than I thought they would look. Like, I didn't have expectations for them. I mean, if you listen to our preview show, not a big fan of Michigan State. I think Tom Izzo is overrated. But even still, they really struggled.
He's going to make me cuss.
They really struggled. But to their credit, though, in the second half, they did push Kansas. I mean, the game was tied a couple times down the stretch in the second half before Kansas was able to kind of get them to arm's length. The other thing that we saw for the first time, one difference that we did see for Kansas in this game was Hunter Dickinson and Floyd Badunga on the floor at the same time. What was your takeaway from seeing those two individuals on the floor at the same time? And do you think it's something that we might see more of going forward?
I think it's something we could see more of. I do think it might be a little bit more situational. It's not necessarily something where it's like, okay, this game you're going to see 10 minutes where Flory and Hunter are sharing the court together. Michigan State plays big, and we talked about that on our preview show with Booker playing that 4 spot at 6'11". And when you think about what Kansas typically plays at that 4 spot with KJ Adams, he's not a 4 stretching 4 either. And so you're not necessarily compacting the court a whole lot more when you bring in Flory than you do with KJ. KJ, yes, he'll handle the ball away from the basket, but at the same time, teams are generally playing him to get to the rim. And so you're not constricting things a little bit more. In that game, Kansas wanted to match up size-wise. You wanted to match up on the glass, things like that. And so, yeah, Kansas could absolutely use that package again. You saw some bright moments, I thought, out of it last night, but I don't think that it's going to be something where it's an every game type of thing. I think it's more of a matchup dependent type of deal.
Yeah, well, I think the main issue you run into if you try to utilize that lineup with those two individuals in it for any extended amount of time is listen, Flory is the backup 5 behind Hunter. So if you're playing both of them and then you want to get Hunter a breath and get Flory a breath, all of a sudden, you're faced with the prospect of more Zach Clements minutes or, KJ Adams, whatever, it just, so I think just from a realistic standpoint, it's not something that is going to be utilized for any extended minutes in any game, right? Like I do think it's something that you can throw out there for a couple of minutes here and there during a game if you feel like you need to, but I don't think it's realistic to assume that it's something you can do consistently just because eventually you run into a situation where it's like, hey, overall, you would rather see a lineup with Hunter at the 5 than Flory coming in off the bench at the 5 versus Hunter and Flory together, and then all of a sudden you're bringing in Zach Clements or you're bringing in, some other.
Don't forget foul trouble too. I mean, foul trouble's the other thing is freshman bigs foul. They just do it. It's a fact of life. Even if you've got a great way ahead of his years 5, he's probably going to foul as a freshman. And so putting them on the court together, it's also a situation where if Hunter picks up 2 fouls, maybe Flory's got 2 fouls too because they're playing together, and then you're in the same situation you're talking about.
Yeah. I also feel bad for AJ Storr. He came in the first half and immediately got 2 fouls, just went straight back to the bench and never really was able to get anything going into it. He still ended up playing, I think, 12 minutes total in the game for KU with 6 points. So, but yeah, obviously Hunter Dickinson was the headliner with 28. Kansas from the perimeter was only 5 of 17 from 3. Rylan Griffin hit 2. Hunter Dickinson did hit the one that he attempted. Didn't really get much else beyond that, but Michigan State was worse. They were 3 of 24. They left Xavier Booker wide open in the first half like 3 times, and he just kept taking them and kept absolutely breaking them. So that was a tough watch if you're a Michigan State fan, I'm sure. But Kansas certainly takes it, and they take the win 77-69. Kansas now, when you look at their upcoming schedule later on this weekend, over the next 2 games, they've got Saturday against Oakland, who obviously was some tournament darlings last year. But I don't think they have. Oh gosh, I'm blanking on his name. Jack. What was his name? The hero for Oakland. Jack. My gosh, blanking on his name. Jack something. The darling of Oakland from last year. And then UNC Wilmington, who's another perennial tournament team before they'll gear up. Jack Golke. That's right. Yeah, I don't know. I knew it was a funny last name. I just couldn't think of it. Jack Golke. Yeah, I don't think he's there anymore because he was like 29 years old.
Yeah, I was gonna say he had like 5 kids and a mortgage a year ago. So,
yeah. So, but either way, still could be a fun matchup against Oakland.
By the way, real quick, Oakland is playing Illinois before they play Kansas. So they're actually playing Illinois today. This is Wednesday. And so we will get to see Oakland against a pretty good team before they play Kansas.
Yeah, we're recording this on Wednesday evening. So we'll get a chance to see Oakland, as you said, against Illinois, I guess, tonight, ahead of that matchup against Kansas coming up on Saturday. Okay, as we kind of teased at the beginning of the show, today is the first day of the early signing period for commitments for the class of 2025 in basketball. Kansas has 2 commitments already signed. One of them is one of the top players in the 2025 class and one of the best players by ranking that Kansas has signed in over a decade. That's Darryn Peterson, a combo guard out of California. He is the highest rated recruit that Kansas has signed since Josh Jackson, and even further back since Andrew Wiggins. Has potential to be an absolute superstar. We're going to get an in-depth breakdown of him from his high school coach, Ryan Bernardi, who's going to be joining us next here on the show. But first, we're going to take a quick break. I do have to tell you, though, you can shop Home Field Apparel at homefieldapparel.com and get 15% off your first order with promo code PAID24. You can get fun shirts like this one from Western Kentucky with the blob. I don't even know, does Western Kentucky's mascot have a name, or is it just the blob or red?
Well, of course he has a name, Nick. I don't know what it is, but he's got a name.
I figured you knew, but I mean, it's just the red blob.
I don't.
So you can get a fun shirt like this with the red blob on it that I'm wearing for Western Kentucky if you're watching on YouTube, or you can get tons of other Kansas items. They've got stuff for the winter weather coming up as well, so you'll be geared up for the last KU football game coming up at home at Arrowhead Stadium against Colorado, and also for college basketball season with KU as well. Ryan Bernardi, the high school coach of Darryn Peterson, is going to join us next on the Paid Podcast. That's coming up next. Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your number one source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com. This is the Paid Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network, along with Kevin Flaherty. I'm Nick Springer, and as promised, we're joined by a very, very special guest. Excited to be joined by head coach Ryan Bernardi of Prolific Prep High School out in California. Coach, thanks so much for hopping on with us. First off, before we dive too much into the player we want to talk about, which is Darryn Peterson, who is committed to Kansas, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your background and what you're doing and how you're enjoying life as a coach at Prolific Prep?
Yeah, what's up, Nick? What's up, Kevin? Great to be on with you guys. This is my third year here at Prolific Prep. We've had a terrific run here at Prolific. Was a high school coach in North Carolina before this. Was a manager at Elon University. And so moved from East Coast. I'm from Boston, so moved from the East Coast out here to the West Coast. And, during our 2 years thus far, we've had a one-and-done NBA player. We've had 2 number 1 players in the country, 4 McDonald's All-Americans. And I'm very excited to be talking about one that we think's got a chance to be the best that we've had, which is Darryn Peterson.
Yeah, let's dive in. Oh,
go ahead. I was going to say, thank you, Nick.
Let's go ahead and dive in right here with Darryn Peterson. I kind of want you to tell me, first off, when you first watched him in person play, what was the one thing you noticed, the thing that jumped out to you the most about him?
Yeah, I first watched Darryn play when I met Kevin, and that was EYBL Kansas City. This was Darryn's 15U summer, which means it was, really 3 summers ago. And he's playing for the New Jersey Scholars, and he's playing up on 16U. And so he's playing a year up, and just remember his maturity, remember how advanced his skill set was, remember how impressive his demeanor was. And so reached out to his dad, Daryl, and built a relationship over a couple of years. The relationship resulted in him telling me no a bunch, but just keep hanging around. And remember watching him on the Adidas circuit for the last 2 summers and seeing how much better he got each time out, seeing his continual development, his body development, his point guard development. Now he's playing the 1, and this thing kind of worked out here at the end with us losing some players last year, with him having a great year at Huntington and looking for a situation to be in a place to win a national championship. We both had needs for each other, and it was a great situation for both of us.
Coach, I know you're a basketball junkie, and you've seen Kansas play. Kansas recruited Darryn as a point guard. How do you see him filling that within the Jayhawks system, and how do you see him filling that role?
Yeah, the great thing about Darryn is he can hurt you in so many different ways, right? And so the thing he's the best at, it's his nickname, which is Bucket Jones, is Darryn can score from all over the floor. Darryn is he's a really gifted and natural scorer of the basketball. It's very hard to keep him out of the paint. He's got big shoulders. He's very skilled. He's got a very good mid-range game and is now, a very good 3-point shooter. And so it's really hard to scout him and to stop him scoring the basketball with one guy. So you might have to bring a second guy to guard him, and that's when his passing has become such an important part of the game, because he's seen double teams and triple teams over the last 12 to 16 months. And so Darryn can hurt you because he puts so much pressure on the defense as a scorer, and he's a very gifted and willing passer. And then he's got a very good feel and IQ. Coach Self, obviously one of the best college coaches of all time. The offense that he runs, Darryn will be a perfect fit for, because he can score it, pass it, make you pay on many different levels.
Coach, what area of Darryn's game specifically do you think he might have the biggest ceiling in? Like, where do you think maybe he could have the highest ceiling of what he does?
The highest ceiling is being a scoring point guard, right? Because the ball's already in his hands. Nobody has to get him the ball. You don't have to run any actions to get him the ball. He's starting with the ball, and then he can just score it and pass it at such a high level. I think he's a really good shooter right now. As he continues to get that, which he will, he'll be a 40% shooter. I mean, it's just gonna be very, very hard to stop him. Now, Nick, the other thing which people don't realize is how good of a defender he is, right? He led all of grassroots basketball, Adidas and Nike, in steals and blocks last year, right? And combined, and led it by a large margin. We played the other day, and you look at his stat sheet, he has 7 steals. And so that ability, next year at Kansas to guard a 23-year-old guard and to be a plus defender, plus the offensive attributes, makes him very special.
We've seen the sort of archetype that Darryn is have success at the NBA level Is there anybody that you would equate his game to, or somebody that he reminds you of at all?
Kev, and my staff will say this, I'm awful at player comparison. and I think Darryn's a hard one for me because any guy you think of, you can come up with some things to say, Darryn does this better than him, or Darryn does that better than him. So, I'm not going to answer the question. I'm going to say Darryn has a chance to be a one-of-a-kind type, a guy that everybody compares themselves to.
Well, when you think about KU fans who are excited about having a player like this coming to Kansas, what can you tell us about maybe Darryn as just a personality, just off the court? What's he like just to be around as a guy off the court and on the court as well?
I think the most incredible thing to us has been his maturity and his demeanor and how consistent he is. We've had very good players here over the years, and you feel like you're talking to an adult when you talk to Darryn and when you coach Darryn. And I'm, continuously impressed by the pursuit of perfection that he's on and his pursuit of feedback and his desire to get better and how easy it is to talk to him. And, I think one of the concerns about building a team with highly rated freshmen is that maturity, right? Experience. But you don't have to worry about that with Darryn. Darryn carries himself like he's a veteran, and I think that will make a huge impact in his ability to play right away, impact right away, have a huge impact next year is his maturity and consistent approach.
You talked a little bit about his personality there. What's he like off the court? Well, what's he like as a kid?
Yeah, very. At the start, you'd think like very unassuming, very quiet, very mature. It has been fun to see him lower his guard a little bit and to see the goofiness and the jokester, a little bit of a prankster, a little bit of a troll to his teammates in a very loving and good way. You're not going to see it right away, right? You're going to see this, you're going to be like, man, has this guy ever smiled? Is this guy he's just about the right stuff? And then you see him joke around in a great way, though, in a great loving way. It makes him very endearing to his teammates.
Was there anything else about him that maybe surprised you that you weren't expecting when you first got a chance to get with him on a coaching level, maybe just about his game or just his personality like you kind of mentioned?
He's an avid movie watcher. He's got some really good movie recommendations, and then we'll watch them 2, 3, 4 times. His dad instilled in him an ability to give really good analogies. His dad is one of the most creative thinkers. And so Darryn all of a sudden will drop an analogy, and I'll tell him, I'll say, hey, if I was blindfolded, I would have thought I was sitting with your dad. And so Darryn's picked that up. His mom is a very hard worker, and works her butt up, and so he's picked up the work ethic from his parents. But he's a great combination of his parents. He's mature, and he's a good movie watcher, like I said.
Kansas has kind of looked at adding potentially a stretch big in this class, whether that's a 4 or 5. You've got a really good one on your hands in Nico. And so what's sort of the preview from Darryn's side with that? How does he pair with Nico? How's the passing and the decision-making coming with a pick and pop big guy kind of like that?
Yeah, so the great thing about our level is, it can be translatable to the college level, right? So we have Nico Bundalo at a high level stretch 4. We play 2 5s, one that Kansas has offered in Obina Akizi, another named Joel Mokweza, who's from Congo, the same area that Flory Badunga is from, a very similar skill set as Flory. And then we have Winters Grady, who's probably the best shooter in high school basketball. And so Darryn's experience of running this team, leading this team, keeping everybody happy, distributing the ball while also being Bucket Jones and scoring the ball, very translatable to what he'll have to do at the next level. And he's done it quite well. He's been efficient. He's been above 7 assists in all 4 of our games so far. Like I said, the defensive impact is a huge deal because he'll just generate possessions with steals and blocks. And then, specifically the relationship on and off the floor with Nico is something that's really special for our group. He looks for Nico. He finds Nico. Whether it be in pops or whether it be in the dunker spot. And, he plays very well with other good players.
For those that are maybe unaware, tell us a little bit more about some of the level of competition that Darryn and your team is going to see this season as well. That's going to help continue to prepare them for the next level.
Sure. So yeah, we compete at the highest level of high school basketball, and we're doing everything we can to win our first national championship. And one of the reasons Darryn came here was to hunt that, right? Was to hunt winning a national championship. And the schedule that we play, right? Like we'll play AJ DeBonsa twice. We'll play Mikkel Brown twice. We'll play the Boozers actually 6 days from today, next Tuesday. We play Cameron and Caden Boozer, right? The list goes on and on, right? AC Compass, Link, IMG. And so the top and the highest level of high school basketball is what Darryn is competing at. And so, hopefully he can help us secure our first national championship and then do the same thing next year at Kansas.
And Coach, we kind of touched on it a little bit, but in terms of at Kansas, I mean, how well do you think he can fit in a system like the one that Bill Self likes to run, both offensively and defensively, and just from a chemistry standpoint, how he could fit in with KU?
Yeah, I think fit in almost doesn't do it justice. I think he'll thrive. I think he'll be a star. I know Coach Self and Kansas as well as Darryn and his family, aren't just expecting to fit in. I think all parties are expecting a star and someone that can lead them to, the NCAA tournament and wins in the NCAA tournament, the Final Four, and a national championship. And Darren's got that ability.
Great. Kevin, you got anything else for Coach?
No, I don't think so. Thanks so much, Coach, for stopping by. Bill Self today called it one of Kansas's biggest recruiting wins of the last 2 decades. And obviously not saying something like that very lightly.
I think the last player, he's the highest ranked since. Do you guys know who it was?
Josh Jackson. Yeah, and then Andrew Wiggins.
Jackson. You guys know where Josh Jackson went to high school?
I'm seeing a prolific prep kind of banner there in the background.
So that we're having. Coach Self and Kansas is as good as they get, and so we're very happy about that.
Awesome. Well, hey, Coach, thanks for joining us today. Good luck, obviously, this season to you and Darryn and the rest of your team. And we look forward to hopefully having Darryn have success at the next level as well, and you guys having success this season also.
See you guys at some games next year.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Coach.
Bye, guys.